This has Vikings fans on high alert as the week's first injury report is revealed, and it's alarming at how long the list is. And Kevin O'Connell brings a new update on JJ McCarthy, while Carson Wentz is ready to hold down the fort for at least one more game. We're going to break down all that in this episode of Vikings Digest. But first, if you're not a part of the nearly 15% of viewers who are already subscribed to the channel and you want to stay up to date on all things Vikings, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any of the episodes as they drop. And with that, I'll hop straight into it, which is the high alert injury updates. So we got our first injury report of the week, and you can see it is a very long one. But there was some silver linings in there where CJ Ham and Tyler Batty did log full practices, so we know that they were designated to return from IR at some point this season, and Kevin O'Connell said they were going to be opening that practice window for them very soon. And in our video yesterday, if you guys missed that, I'll link it at the end of this episode. But in that, we kind of covered all the procedural kind of first wave of injury updates. Brian O'Neill, Andrew Van Ginkel, CJ Ham, all those things. But having CJ Ham, if you guys didn't see that video yesterday, I was saying how much this opens up an opportunity for this Vikings offense. You can run an I formation now again. You can use him as a pass blocker. You can use him as an extra run blocker. And it brings open more opportunities with this decimated offensive line, where if you have CJ Ham as a pass blocker, whether in I formation or even in a gun, you have a little bit more extra time to find your receivers, because we know that Kevin O'Connell doesn't really have a lot of quick hitters in his arsenal. We saw how we got torched by those against the Steelers, so we need a few of those of our own, especially if we're going to be facing a lot of pressure with a Swiss cheese offensive line with all the injuries that we're dealing with at the early point of this season. So if you have that, buys you a little bit more time. You can throw it in the pocket a bit more, find JJ on a quick hitter, hit Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, or somebody without a route that takes so many time to develop when you're not going to have a very clean pocket because of this O-line. With the injuries, of course, did not stop there. We know Donovan Jackson was not going to be practicing because he's still recovering from that wrist surgery. Then you see Christian Darrisaw. He got a rest day, so he wasn't practicing, but give him all the rest that he needs. Let that big boy rest. Michael Juergens with a hamstring did not practice. Ryan Kelly, concussion, did not practice. Brian O'Neill with his knee did not practice, as we kind of anticipated. Xavier Scott did log a full practice, so that's good to have him as another weapon in the arsenal. Andrew Van Ginkel and Ben Urasek also did not practice. But then you see there JJ McCarthy with that ankle. Of course, he did not practice, but we did get an update from Kevin O'Connell that we're going to touch on in a second. But yes, this injury list is very, very long. In our video yesterday, and to a few people that I was talking to as well, because there's a lot of people in my day-to-day life, whenever the Vikings do well, I get texts of them saying, hey, you must be happy. Or more so the opposite, whenever the Vikings are doing bad, that's when I get most text messages just roasting my team, just roasting me. Oh, the Vikings suck, all things like that. You guys know how it goes with trash talking amongst your peers. But when I was asked about the injuries that we were facing, I was saying that it would be much better to have this earlier in the season rather than later in the season. You see a lot of these weapons: Andrew Van Ginkel, JJ McCarthy for a lot of unproven aspects, Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Brian O'Neill, and so many other ones, Tristan Darrisaw, Donovan Jackson. These are so many key pieces for Minnesota that you want to have them later in the year rather than earlier in the year. Yes, you want to win as many games as you can, but if Minnesota can get through this first half of the season, keeping their heads above water, staying at 500 or just above it, where they're just in playoff contention, by the time that this team gets fully healthy, we can rattle off an 11-6 season or a 12-5 season, but play with the mentality of a 14-3 team. We saw that be a very big benefit for the LA Rams last year, where they had a lot of dysfunction and some injuries early on in the season. But then once they had everybody back, they were not what their record reflected. They played so much better than their 11-6 record. They were playing like a 14-3 team, and it proved it in that playoff game against Minnesota, where they absolutely dog walked us. And even early on in the season when they dog walked us on Thursday Night Football. So it goes to show that when you're a team that has a lot of players but you're riddled with injuries, your record may not always reflect how good your team is. So if Minnesota can have this momentum going into the postseason rather than being decimated going into the postseason, kind of hobbling into there, I would much rather go into the postseason with a full steam engine and just powering through it, where the early parts of the season, yeah, there's a lot to navigate, finding your identity, finding this team chemistry, navigating those injuries. It's a pain in the ass, but if you can get to this midpoint in the season, you get everybody healthy, that momentum is going to be crazy, because we saw in that Bengals game what this team can look like when they're firing on all cylinders. If you can imagine that through the later part of the season when we have so many road games, it is not even funny, and they are against tough teams We're going to be going into MetLife Stadium. We're going to be going against the Eagles. We're going to be going against the Cowboys, who are seemingly really clicking on offense right now. They have the best offense in the league, but the worst defense, so we can exploit that. But there's a lot of, in the Eagles, of course, there's a lot of tough matchups that the Vikings have coming their way later on in the season versus the early stage. So if you can just focus on getting those guys back for those later games, that is the main thing. But sticking with the injury report there, we have an update on JJ McCarthy, where Kevin O'Connell was saying that JJ's working his way back. He's kind of entering the next phase of his rehab where he can get a little bit more active, and looking forward to getting him back on the field, practicing with the team as soon as we can. But at the same time, we want to be really smart and make sure that we let that high ankle sprain fully heal. Then he can really start attacking it. And that is a huge thing that the Vikings want to stress. We saw that with Christian Darrisaw. We saw that with TJ Hawkinson. And we've seen it with JJ McCarthy to an extent where they want to make sure that he is fully ready to go when he is back. It's not going to be one of those things like Kevin O'Connell said, where it's a Saturday night and he's ready to go and you just throw him in without a full week of game prep or practicing. It's not going to be like that. They're going to make sure that if he's 110%, they're probably going to give it at least one more week after that, especially if it's one of those things where he feels 110% on a Thursday or a Wednesday rather than a Monday. They're going to be willing to push that back at least one more game so that he can come back at 110% with that full week of game prep rather than just being thrown into the fire once again, as we've seen that hasn't really been a benefit to him with those first two starts that he had, being in 2 primetime games and on a short week going into that second game. So there's a lot of things at play here for the Minnesota Vikings. We want to be cautious with JJ McCarthy. And with Carson Wentz being serviceable, I know that a lot of people want to jump on the blame for him for that loss on Sunday. It was not on him. That offensive line getting injured was a massive part of that. The batted interceptions were not his fault. Just had no protection and no time to throw. Yes, the self-inflicted stuff like penalties and things like that, they're going to have to clean that up. And Kevin O'Connell said that. And Carson Wentz also said that, where there's still things we can clean up and do better. And he's not just talking about an offensive line perspective. He was saying those are things where we just got to lock in on all the small things and really focus in and practice. And those things are easy and just second nature to us. And this sounds a lot like Kevin O'Connell talking, where KOC in his press conference today was asked about the quarterback whisperer tag that people have given him, but he's never referred to himself as that. I just wanted to make sure it's a comfortable environment for the quarterback. But what have we seen happen through every quarterback that's played with Kevin O'Connell, from Kirk Cousins to JJ McCarthy, Sam Darnold, and now Carson Wentz? They all seem to adopt his identity of coaching, or the way of talking in press conferences, where they know the right words to say and they say it exactly the way he says it, and they almost become a mini-me of Kevin O'Connell. So having Carson Wentz in there with the experience that he has and being a journeyman of his sorts, and at one point was the best quarterback in the NFL for a season, that is something where Minnesota has a big asset in what he brings to the table in his experience, and still has the talent. We've seen in that Cincinnati game, he was slinging that thing. We saw it even in the Pittsburgh game. When he has time and has that protection, he can absolutely sling it and find Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Both of them had each over 100 yards. So Carson Wentz is a very serviceable backup quarterback for right now, and more than serviceable, I would say, considering the situation that Minnesota is in and the talent that they have around him when fully healthy. It's just a matter of getting that offensive line fully healthy at the same time, all playing at the same time on the field. It's going to be a while before we see that, and probably mid-season, but that's also when we're probably going to see JJ McCarthy really start to come into his own as well, because we were still battling those offensive line injuries for the first 2 games for him. He didn't have that offensive line, and yes, this is the NFL, and Kevin O'Connell said it before. It's next man up. There's no excuses. However, when you have a young quarterback who's basically a rookie, he needs as much protection as he can get, and that's why Minnesota invested in it, because they were expecting this offensive line to be fully healthy and to have them all there and have that protection. But it hasn't been like that, and the play has definitely reflected that. So here's hoping that once this offensive line gets healthy, that's when we're going to see the real JJ McCarthy stand up. But what are your guys' thoughts on all of this down below? What are your thoughts on the injury list for the first injury report for this week? Let us know your comments down below, and how excited are you to see this London game play out? How scared of you of Myles Garrett? 95 is going to be a big problem. So hopefully they do a lot of runs to the outside, not on the side of the field that he's on, because we saw Jahmyr Gibbs have a lot of success with that. Whereas when they try and run up the middle, David Montgomery did not have that success. So hopefully that's what they do with Jordan Mason. Just send him out wide on the opposite side that Myles Garrett is. Go where 95 is not, and you will have success, hopefully. But let us know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this episode of Vikings Digest. I've been your host, Griffen. Take care.